Welcome to the 2026 Community Events Workshop. My name's Jen Arbo. I'm the manager of Community Partnerships. So Community Partnerships oversees film, grants, volunteers, and also events. So several of my team are here tonight, and I'll just introduce Stephen is the grants coordinator, who you'll probably, you may have spoken to if you received a grant. Jill Howie is our volunteer coordinator, who, if you've asked for volunteer support or have volunteered for the city, you've probably talked to her. There's also some other city staff here. So Mike Antonielli is from engineering department, as well as Stacey Nevis. Sean Sheehan is our manager of street use compliance and liaison. Did I get it right?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm going to come to you guys in a second. What other city staff do we have? Ashley Young is our manager of communications. And then we've also got both Kenny Chow and Michael Nguyen, who are from transportation. And if you've ever closed a road, you've probably talked to one of them as well. The events team this year is Melissa Flintel, who's over there, and Karina Rylick.
Yep.
Close. Okay. Sure. And Jen Voxfoldy, who's the other Jen. So if you hear Jen A and Jen B, that's Jen B. And then Milka Maladu is also with us as well. So what tonight looks like, we'll begin first. I just want to acknowledge we're on the unceded and unsurrendered land of the Halkomelin speaking people, and that includes several Coast Salish nations, including Kwantlen, Coquitlam, Coquite, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. We're pretty aware of the fact that colonialism has really impacted these nations, and that we're doing our best to sort of think through what that means for us, and what work that looks like as a municipality, and then also as a person. I have a presentation. It's long. I'm sorry. It is being recorded, so you don't need to take notes. A lot of the slides actually contain a lot of the words that I'll be saying, so you don't necessarily have to desperately take notes. Feel free. After the presentation, we'll have a little quick break, and then we'll come back. And if you have questions for any of the different staff departments that are here, they're sort of stationed around the room, and they can support you with your specific circumstance. When we've done these before, we've done just sort of like everybody put their hand up and ask a question. And what that has meant for some people who aren't closing a road or aren't dealing with food and beverage and who aren't doing this, so they have to sit there very patiently and wait for their opportunity to ask a question about garbage trucks, for example. So doing it this way gives you the opportunity to really hone in on the person that you need to speak with. If there's someone that you want to talk to that's not here, for example, Fire wasn't able to make it tonight, you can talk to anyone of the event team, and we'll be sure to write down your question and bring back an answer to you if we don't know it. All right. A little bit of housekeeping. Just outside this door, there's a snack table. Feel free to replenish your snacks. There are 3 different washrooms in this top hallway. There's a male and female washroom and an all-gender washroom. They're all in a line on the left-hand side. If there's an emergency, we're getting out of here by going down the stairs and out the back door, and we'll all do it together. All right. So I just started explaining this one, so we're good to go. So let's talk about event planning and what your application looks like. See, I've even talked about this, but there's 2 important pieces of information on this slide. One is that email address. It's specialevents@newwestcity.ca. That goes to all of the events team and myself. So if somebody's off work on a vacation, always use that email address, because it gives us the opportunity for somebody else to provide you with service right away. If you are hosting an event in the city of New Westminster, especially on public property, but if it is impacting the public, everything you will need is on the online request form and information page, which is newwestcity.ca/hosting-and-event. So if you take nothing from this evening, take those 2 pieces. So what does the application process look like when you're deciding you're going to host an event? For some of you, I recognize you, this is probably your 10th, 11th, 12th, 20th event you've done. For some of you, this might be your very first one. So just to quickly outline the process, there is an online request form. That's just like a little expression of interest to tell us approximately when, where, and what you're thinking your event is. It doesn't guarantee anything, and it just gives us the opportunity to have a little bit more information so that we can check back with you about what you might need. From there, you will be assigned an event contact. That could be one of the team. and that'll be the person that works with you for most of the work that you do. They'll book the space for you based on what you need. There's different booking processes based on, say, if you're the farmer's market and you're doing something in front of City Hall versus if you want to use a sports field versus if you want to use an indoor facility. So there's different processes and they'll help you with that. You then get the community events package. It's not small. We know that. We really expect folks to fill out what they can at the time of receiving it. And it is like an ongoing and dynamic process. You're going to fill in parts of it. We might come back and ask more questions. Your event contact is there to help you through the process. We'll probably ask you for a deposit because at some point we have to charge you for the services that you're going to be using, or maybe the whole cost, depending upon what we're looking at. You will have to give us a site map and a transportation management plan. Those seem really overwhelming and scary, but we're here to help. You'll get a permit, and your permit might be a letter of agreement. It might be a street occupancy permit. It might be a facility contract. We'll make sure you get the right one. And then from there, you get to have an event, which we love. These are the general deadlines for applications. So we call small scale events things that don't have food, liquor, or road closures. 30 days notice is ideal. We'll work with you if we can. If it's shorter notice, if something comes up or you get a grant opportunity and you really want to put together an event, reach out and talk to us and we'll do what we can. But generally about 30 days is required. Larger scale events might have food, they might have liquor, they might have a road closure. All of those involve different city departments. And so every time you add a layer on, it means someone has to review it. Someone has to find time in their schedule to review it, provide feedback, make adjustments, go back and forth. And so we ask for 60 days notice. And parades or festivals, it's similar to a larger scale event, but we actually have a bylaw that says you have to request a parade in writing 6 months in advance. You might not know all your details, and that's okay, but you have to make the request. Site maps. We ask for a lot of stuff on your site map, and it's for the safety component as well as the traffic management component. Plus, it's just really great information for you to know as an event organizer when you're running your event, where your first aid tent is, where your info booth is. These are things that your attendees might want to know as well. So going through the exercise of building a site map is really valuable. There's a lot that we ask for. A couple I'd like to point out is dimensions between the various elements. Meaning, like, if you've got a food truck, there's some rules about how far away that food truck needs to be from another food truck. We'll want an idea of any like entrance or exit locations for anything that's fenced or enclosed. If it's not a fenced or enclosed space, we want to know things like what's the traffic flow path. So I'm not picking on the farmer's market, I promise. But one of the things with the farmer's market is that there's a path for the vendors to come in, and depending upon where they're located, they go this way or they go this way. And then when their day is done, they exit in another way as well. And that's for safety. We all know what happened with the tragedy at the Lapu Lapu Festival. And as a result, we're a lot more stringent when we look at our site maps and when we ask for it. We don't need to know where every single food vendor is, or sorry, where every single non-food vendor is. We need to know where every single food vendor is. So if they are preparing food on site in a truck or under a tent, or if they're handing out samples, or if they're selling food, because those are regulated by Fraser Health, those are things we have to know where they're going to be located. Their proximity to other things like propane tanks, generators, things that can catch on fire, combustibles, that's all really important. But I don't necessarily need to know where, you know, Susan's craft booth is in proximity to something else. It's really about the food vendors. That's the most important part. We'll help you with your site map. It is an ongoing process. I'll probably say that a lot tonight, but we'll point out things that we need for you to add onto it. Now I'm going to show you two examples of site maps. We've got two that we were provided with permission, and thank you so much to our friends at HIAC. So I know it's very small on the screen, but this gives you a really good idea of what their intention was. They figured out where their trucks would be. They gave a listing of their vendors. They have a north arrow included on their map. They highlighted the dimensions where things were and some of the proximity, like the street names. They also were able to identify sort of where carnival games will be. Carnival games are a surprising risk in the world of insurance advisors. So this is a great site map that we often share with folks. I'll show you another one too. And thank you to Pride for giving us permission to use this. So this is a bit smaller because it's such a long, stretched out linear festival. But the beauty of this one that I'd point out is it's really clear to see where food will be. So that's the most important thing for fire, as well as where all the cross streets are. So when police review this, they'll be thinking about, what are the barriers in between the different streets? How are we monitoring for that? Transportation also uses that information when they're figuring out the traffic management plan and figuring out how many barriers and barricades we might need. All of those things, barriers, barricades, police, all that costs more money each time you add more on. So that's why when we see our site maps, they are super valuable to us. I'll also note that these tend to be huge documents and we get a lot of them. So we love it if you use Dropbox or Google Drive or some sort of file sharing service rather than sending us a 25 megabyte file. It blows up our inbox. Sometimes we don't even see them because it gets just automatically pruned out in the way that technology works. So it's always great if you can upload it somewhere and send us a link to review. All right, we're going to talk a bit about protocols and some city guidelines. Specifically, I wanted to mention around land acknowledgements. We get a lot of questions about land acknowledgements and welcomes. So, these are the basics. Land acknowledgements and including Indigenous knowledge keepers is a sign that you are committed to truth and reconciliation, which the City of New Westminster is. We've got a bunch of information on our website, yearoftruth.ca, that you can have a look at the city's own journey and think about how it might apply to your event organization. Not every event is going to make sense. For example, if you have an event that doesn't have a PA system or an agenda with a particular time, it may make sense for that to not happen, but you might want to consider another way, like a performance. I mentioned the different nations in my own acknowledgement. So those are the ones that the city does acknowledge. It's really complicated, as we've all learned over the years around Indigenous histories, because colonialism kind of just made us made decisions on their behalf. And so as a result, these are the ones the city acknowledges. And order, we get a lot of questions about the order. Right now, the city uses alphabetical. It feels fair. It feels like a natural order. Again, you get to make decisions for your event organization. I do recommend that you really practice pronunciations. It's important to know how to say things like Haukemelan or how to say other words that feel foreign in our mouth. We all just learned about the new bridge, Stalowassam, and so practicing those words is really valuable. When inviting a nation to an event, what's the appropriate role to invite them to perform? So it could be a cultural presentation, it could be to witness what you're doing, it could be to speak, share a story. You know your event. Be very clear in your invitation when you invite them. Give them lots of notice. They may ask for an honorarium, or you might want to proactively offer one, and it is labor. So it is considered a reasonable thing to pay them for that. And what land acknowledgement should be used? Well, your organization may have done some work here. You may be further along in your journey of truth and reconciliation than another organization. And as a result, you may have a land acknowledgement that you use. You are welcome to use the city's. It's on the footer of our website, and it's available in our event package too. There is a piece around your dignitaries as well I wanted to mention. We've had a couple of examples when I've been in an event and a dignitary gives a land acknowledgement, and then the next dignitary gets up and gives a land acknowledgement, and then the next dignitary gets up and gives a land acknowledgement. And all of this was, you may have had an Indigenous knowledge keeper give a welcoming. So just be mindful that you give one, and when you do it over and over and over, it can be a bit of a checkbox. It's okay to have a meaningful response, but at the same time, don't just keep repeating the same words. Do you need to invite dignitaries? If you are a grant recipient of the City of New Westminster, one of your obligations to us is that if there is a component of your event that will have an opportunity for remarks, that the mayor be invited to speak. If there is no component where there will be remarks, you can still invite mayor and council to attend. They all have their own personal social media. They can all promote it for you. So don't be afraid to invite them. We also have members of parliament and the members of legislative assembly. So that's federal and provincial. We have currently 1 MP and 3 MLAs. The electoral districts got kind of moved around. If ever you're unsure, you can log on to the federal government and the provincial government's website, and they'll tell you who your person is. Best way to invite them is early and often. Send it at least 3 weeks in advance. If you're sending an invitation to the MPs and the MLAs, you're going to send it to them directly, not through us. We do not make that invitation on your behalf. For anything related to mayor and council, you can have them just email clerks@newwestcity.ca and they'll forward it to the right place, whether it's the mayor's office and his executive assistant, or whether it's one of the legislative services staff who work with the councillors. So what order should they speak in? This is the question that comes up. Everyone just wants to do good, right? Like we all just want to make sure we're following the right protocol. So if the mayor speaks, councillors don't also give remarks unless there's some very specific, unique reason. Generally, it's accepted that mayor speaks on behalf of mayor and council. They're a collective. If you do choose to invite your MPs and MLAs, a lot of times it will essentially go Indigenous representation, the host mayor, then federal, then provincial. But in some circumstances, it changes up. So at Remembrance Day, which is an ode acknowledgement day that we put on, it goes in a different order. So we acknowledge like MPs, for example, before. So, you know, sort of country, province, city. So it depends. You'll know and if you don't know, ask. It is okay to ask and it's okay to not know. We're all learning together. I mentioned some obligations around being a grant recipient. So you also need to acknowledge the financial contribution in your promotion and marketing. This might be on your website. This could be putting our logo on posters. This could be, if you write a news release, this could be acknowledging that your event is possible based on that. You're acknowledging the financial support, whether you get cash or city services, it does come at a financial cost. And we do have a high quality version of the logo available. There is a link in your grant award letter. And if for any reason you can't find it, you can always email communications@newwestcity.ca and they'd be happy to provide you the right format for whatever your use is. Make sure you use the new logo, which all of us have these lovely hoodies on today. So make sure you're using the new logo. So if you have an old poster you're recycling from a previous event, make sure you update it. With the new logo also comes some new graphic standards. So we're happy to help you with that if you want to send it to us for approval, if you want us to take a look, and we'll work with the communications colleagues to make sure it adheres to the standards. There's also grant reporting you have to do. We've worked really hard over this last year to make the grant reporting a simpler process for folks. It's now done online and you just log in the same place that you applied. You can always email grants@newwestcity.ca. In order to get some help if you find it to be cumbersome or confusing. So far, people are liking it, which is great. And I'll just note that getting a grant doesn't mean your event is approved. There's a whole other process. It just means that some of the money part will be taken care of. We added in this slide new this year because it actually was brought to our attention that we hadn't really touched on it. So we wanted to mention around photo consent at public events. At our events, we have these big plastic A-frame signs, and those signs let people know that there may be a photographer. We may use it for promotional and marketing purposes. It acknowledges that we may be taking pictures and that you need to be aware that it's happening. We recommend you do the same. There's some really great tips on this side. One of the things that you could do if you do have an MC is make sure the MC announces it, that there's a photographer and they're wearing a badge that says photographer. The other piece that I wanted to mention is related to your grants reporting. We ask you to upload photos that we can use in marketing. Some of those photos are in this presentation, but we need to make sure that you have consent. So make sure your photographer is carrying either a digital or paper form of a video and photo consent form, and that it also says that the city can use them. You don't have to do that unless you're a grant recipient, but we would love to use your photos too. Obviously thinking about what type of photos are the best, large wide angle shots that are big, like we call them editorial, I guess, essentially. You don't necessarily have to get consent for all of those. Those are acceptable to take those. But anytime you focus in on a single person, especially if it's a child, it's really, really important that you have consent for those photos. And if anyone does say, please don't take a photo of me, make sure your photographer deletes it right then and there. Another important thing we always get asked is, how can you help us market our event? This is the Lay's potato chip conundrum. If we market one event for an event organizer, we have to market everyone's event for an organizer. And then the city struggles to keep up with just the volume of stuff that we also have to communicate out, whether it's missed garbage collection, new curbside calendars available, don't forget to get a dog license, the road is closed, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't. But we do have a couple of ways we can support you. One is our online events calendar. It's newwestcity.ca/events. You can submit any kind of an event listing in there as long as you're a New Westminster-based organization. We're happy to approve it. If your event is multiple days or weeks, like every Thursday, you need to submit a new submission for each one. Coming soon, we will have a new website that will give us a little bit more functionality for that. But for right now, you have to submit for every day. We also have the Active Living Guide, and special for those of you in the room, I have managed to secure an extra half a day for you to put these in. So the normal deadline for an advertisement in the Active Living Guide is actually tomorrow. But sorry, the whole year? No, so it's based on each Active Living Guide. So there's a rolling kind of opportunity. If you go to community-page, it's got all of them, so you can put them in your calendar for the rest of the year. But the marketing department in Parks and Recreation said they're willing to accept from this group until Friday at noon. So you got an extra morning to put together something. So definitely put a star beside newwestcity.ca/community-page. We also definitely say utilize your social media accounts. All of the calendars, like tourism has a calendar. If your event's happening downtown New Westminster BIA has a calendar. So utilize everything you've got, get the word out that way for sure. As we know, there's a lot of really active Facebook groups as well in New Westminster, and there's quite a few of them that are more than happy. Reddit is another place where they have a thread every month for what's happening in New West. So definitely utilize everything that you're able to. New this year, we're trying something new. We are each month going to put together a social media post that acknowledges some of the grant recipients. Some of them aren't necessarily putting on an event. They're doing, for example, meals for seniors. And so they don't necessarily have a month that we would attribute them to. So we'll be dividing them up. But those that do have a month where their event happens, we'll be working hard to acknowledge them in that month. We won't necessarily be posting every detail about your event, but we'll acknowledge you as a grant recipient. Related to communications is community engagement. Business engagement is important, especially if you're closing a road or might be impacting business operations. We really recommend working with business owners and acknowledging that your event might have an unintended impact. So perhaps they're having a delivery of their brand new office furniture and it's the day your event's going to close the road. So going around to businesses, part of your neighborhood notification process that the events office will ask you to do will include engaging with businesses and asking how you can work together. You could offer them a free stall, for example, if that's a viable option. You could also seek out volunteer opportunities. You really want to try and develop a relationship with businesses. If you can, purchase goods from them as well. So there's ways. So in person is always a great way to invite businesses who are impacted in the immediate event area. There is always a really great way to acknowledge at the event that they've been supportive and that you appreciate it. And if you have an impacted business who is not in support of your event, which does happen, it does not mean that the city won't approve your event. But we do ask that you try hard to mitigate their concerns and find ways to work with them wherever possible. The city does have a good neighbor policy as well. The good neighbor policy is more specifically to construction projects, but we take a lot of those practices and principles and do apply them as well. So that's things like being mindful of your noise. That's things like, being aware of your setup time, beeping alarms that back up are super annoying for some people. So if your event ends at 10 p.m., for example, making sure that all of your volunteers know to try and be as quiet as possible is really helpful. We also ask in the good neighbor policy that you're respectful of the environment. So, no idling, for example. This policy is linked in the events package. All right, let's talk about events operation. So you may have heard us use the term FEST, the festivals and events staff team. This is comprised of internal and external stakeholders, including many of the staff who are here today, as well as police, fire, and our colleagues at Fraser Health. We work really closely with them, and they're a really good and important partner for events in New Westminster. And sometimes we add on other stakeholders. Business licensing once in a while. If it's a very complex event with lots of vendors, we sometimes need to work with business licensing. We might work with a facility manager, for example. If there's an event taking place right in front of Sportsplex, we might invite the facility manager to join in as well. Every once in a while, the Minister of Transportation Infrastructure might be a part of the conversation too, but we invite them based on what we need. Volunteers. So you probably have your own volunteer database. We can also support your event by presenting volunteer opportunities to our volunteer database. There's currently 600? 900 volunteers in our database, and we don't have enough volunteer opportunities for them. So if you are here at this workshop, or watching the recording, you get the ability to send a message to us as long as you provide us with all the information, and we just pass it on to the database. We don't vet anyone, we don't do any recruiting for you, but we can at least leverage what we've already got, and we'd love to share that opportunity with you. Transportation. So all of you road closing events have probably had lots of conversations with our transportation team, and we had to bring 2 of them because we were so concerned with all the questions we might have. But transportation does provide a lot in terms of an event, in terms of the traffic management plan, thinking about public safety and making sure the regulatory authority, like I didn't know, for example, the Queensboro Bridge is not owned necessarily by us or whatever, it's owned by Modi. And so we have to work with them if we're doing something related to the Queensboro Bridge. And so transportation really helps us know who owns what and who we have to talk to get permission. As well, they're already really well aware of other projects happening in the city so that they can flag to us if there's something that might be an issue. We expect event organizers to figure out things like how you're going to park, the direction that they're parking. We need to make sure that vehicle access is maintained for emergency vehicles. We want to make sure that if there's a problem, like somebody's blocked a driveway, that the event organizer is prepared to deal with it. We don't necessarily police or regulate that, but if we have to, we can send someone from parking and towing. There are some pretty complicated rules around parking and towing. We'll talk about those in a moment. But there are a couple of little numbers in here. So things like 5 meters from a hydrant, 6 meters from a crosswalk, 6 meters from the approach of a stop sign. On the hosting an event webpage, we previously did do an info session. Michael was kind enough to spend some time. So this topic really gets drilled down in that recorded session. But traffic management plans are the primary thing that we'll probably talk a little bit about. Did you bring a sample? Props, lovely. So a traffic management plan includes a couple parts: the traffic control plan, advanced sign plan, as well as a parking restrictions plan. The reason there's 3 is because when we go and restrict parking for an event, someone has to go out and put up those signs and say, you can't park here. And someone has to build those great big advanced warning signs, those orange ones. We try and reuse them year over year if we can, but somebody has to know where those are all going. And then there's also a traffic control plan. Is it police? Is it a traffic management company? Is it a volunteer or a city staff person? Are we using vehicle barricades? And so there's multiple components, and these are very official documents that have a little special seal that they get signed off on. And these are probably one of the most important pieces if you are closing a road for an event. And if you have questions about traffic management plans, we've got these samples here that you can take a peek at. And we're also happy to set up any kind of a one-on-one to talk about your unique needs, especially if you're making changes for your event this year. Engineering, operations, and public works. There's a lot of roles for public works at our community events, whether that's managing waste or dealing with street sweeping, providing fleet vehicles for use as barricades, making the signs themselves that I mentioned. So there's a lot of jobs that cross over. Now, keep in mind, we're a city and our regular job is not events. Well, ours is, but our regular job isn't events. And so engineering, operations, and public works really supports us for events, but they do have capacity for how much they can provide. So we don't have like a million barricades waiting around to be used. So at some of the larger events that require a lot of barricades, we rent those. And that's where city services comes in and where we have the opportunity to rent them. We try and help where we can. We have to make sure our own needs are met first. So For example, if you need a garbage truck to block a road, it still has to go collect the garbage. So we have to be careful around the timing. We also have parking and towing. There are some rules regulating how we can tow a vehicle that's parked in your event footprint. That's something that only certain people can do. A bylaw officer needs to be there or police need to be there. So if you come across your event day and you're ready to start and there's a car parked there, try not to panic, but be prepared to work around it. It does take a while. And also if that tow truck that's on shift is dealing with a motor vehicle accident that's, on the bridge on the other side of town, they're going to take care of that first. So public safety becomes more important than making sure that that footprint's maintained. So always have a backup plan in mind of what you can do to manage that. At your event, you will have an event contact, and that's the person that will support you and will work to try and take care of whatever the issue is. Whether it's a car parked in the wrong spot or if we're missing a garbage can or, that sort of stuff. We are human and we make mistakes. We try really hard and do a lot of pre-planning though. Waste management is a really big issue. There's a lot of companies out there that are offering waste management services, and they offer multi-stream services. So that's your organics, your recycling, and your landfill, waste destined for landfill. We can provide garbage services. We don't have a sort facility in New Westminster, so we can't take your recyclables and sort them for you. And so we ask for event organizers to come up with a plan for how they'll manage the other streams of waste. Or when in doubt, throw it out. It's a crappy way to do it, but events often generate tons of single-use trash. There has been some really good examples in the community of people using reusables and contracting with companies to have, I think Hayek does it for their festival. They have used a company before that they actually manage the garbage. So there's lots of really unique options out there. And there may be some unique options for volunteers or school-age people, especially when it comes to refundables. So your waste management plan is your responsibility. We are here to help as much as we can, but we do have a capacity for what we can do for you. And we expect you to come up with a plan. Since taking on this role, I've learned some interesting things like how many garbage bins fit in the back of a pickup truck. And so if somebody says, I want 14 garbage bins, that has an implication because it means there's going to be multiple truck trips back and forth. But if they say, I want 6, I can go, yes, we can do 6. So that's one trip. So just being mindful of the capacity is really important. Police definitely have a role at events, especially in light of Lapu Lapu and just in the complexity and scope and scale of some of our events. It's public safety, number one. They also support the traffic control and they support fire as well as any emergency health services. They would help if there was an ambulance that was required and help get the ambulance into the site. And then they support us, which we love. I wanted to just talk a little bit about risk assessments. We get a lot of questions about this. Risk assessments are done by the police. When you submit your first application, they'll do a preliminary one. They'll go, this is what we think. And then they'll do one closer to the date because there may be changes that happen. There might be your programming changes and you decide to add maybe a big star on your performance stage. Maybe they donate their services. So that may mean that they have to interact with a security company, or there might be a different way that they approach it. So they perform another risk assessment much closer to the date. And that would include anything related to provincial or national concerns that have come up. So they perform another one. They kind of approve what you propose. They do have the regulatory power to make that decision and how police appear and show up at your event. It is important that we work with you as an event organizer, but also it's part of our job to maintain public safety. Police services, if additional ones are required, do come at a cost. So the cost is about $150 an hour, and it's a minimum 4 hours and a minimum 2 police. That includes their vehicles and any sort of incidentals. That's not a wage, it's the service of police. And so in your city services quote, if you received one for your grant application, we would have made an assumption based on the scale of your last year's event. And so we'll talk with you about your event for this year and see if it changes at all. Okay, we're more than halfway, I promise. Okay, so food and beverage at events, nothing like having a nice snack and a drink at an event. Food brings us together, so it's a really important part of a lot of events. There are some obligations for your vendors if they are the people who are selling the food and beverage. They work very closely with Fraser Health. They talk with Fraser Health. They get approval from Fraser Health. Your job as an event organizer is to make sure they do that and then to prove it to us that they did. So you become the middle person in that conversation. Some frustrating rules related to food trucks. We have a bylaw that governs food trucks, and so there is a little bit of added work required with the food truck, but you have to imagine it is both an ignition source and a fuel source on wheels. And so it is a safety consideration to think about how far away they are from combustibles. We also ask that food trucks take all of their trash with them. Sometimes they'll have big containers that used to have oil in them or boxes where their tomatoes came in. We expect them to take that trash. That's not necessarily our job to take that, or yours as the event organizer. They do require 3 approvals. They require a health approval from Fraser Health or their local health authority. That could be Coastal Health or others. They require a food decal, which is from the Greater Vancouver Fire Chiefs Association. And that's a food decal that runs. There's a picture of it right there. And it runs from April to April, frustratingly. So if you have an event in March and an event in May, guess what? You need 2 copies of their decal. They also need extra insurance, naming the city as additional insured because they present additional risk. We ask for extra insurance from the vendor as well as from you as the event organizer. We may ask for a business license, and I'll tell you, if they get a City of New Westminster annual business license, it is way easier to host that food truck. So you can always encourage them to just go get a City of New Westminster business license. Here's a little illustration that kind of shows some of the things. This is small, obviously, for the purposes of our presentation, but it gives you an idea that inside you've got fires, you've got propane tanks, you've got all these things that are combustible inside, plus a human working in it. So you do have to be really mindful where things are. Food trailers are very similar to food trucks, and we'll work with you if that's what you have. Liquor service at events. So I will say right now, cannabis is not approved at public events. The province is making consideration of it, but right now liquor service, which is regulated by the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, is your option. In the US, you have 3 options: a beer garden, an extended patio, or you can apply for site-wide. We have some restrictions about who can apply for that. And there's restrictions in all of these. So if you're a business and you want an extended patio, it's your job. If you're an event organizer and you want a beer garden, it's your job. So there's a couple of different rules and approaches. Part of that is just how LCRB regulates things, but we'll work with you and let you know who you have to talk to. Liquor is approved by both police and the city, as well as the LCRB. Going back to fire, they gave us that great food truck diagram, but going back to fire, they often will come to events as a fire inspector. They have a declaration form that they expect everyone, all the vendors, to fill out. And that declaration form, they need to keep a copy of it. You don't have to submit it, but they need to, all the vendors have to keep a copy. And it says things like how far away their things will be stored, that they know how to properly use a fire hydrant, or sorry, not a hydrant. They don't need to use a fire hydrant, an extinguisher. So the declaration form is something that is in the community events. On the topic of event safety, there's a couple of other things. First aid, obviously you want first aid services if your event is of a larger size, but that could be, if your event's small, it could be just a person who has first aid training and a first aid kit, but you might want to designate them with a t-shirt that says, "I know first aid." If your event is larger, they're going to have a first aid table, maybe even 2. We have a great info sheet we developed about lost vulnerable folks. That could be children. It could also be seniors with dementia, for example. I would say of the events the city's hosted, we have more grandmas who have been lost than children who have been lost. So we have some suggestion that were sort of pulled together from New West Police as well as us around how to manage that. A lot of it is pre-planning. What are your volunteers going to be doing? Who do they call? How long do you wait? Before calling 911, a lost vulnerable person is a big deal. Emergency plan. This seems scary to a lot of event organizers. We try really, really hard not to make it scary, but you do need to think about what you will do in the event of an emergency. Whose job is it to call 911? Who will meet the police or other emergency services? How will an emergency vehicle get into the event? How will you manage crowds? How will you talk to one another as volunteers? That could be as sophisticated as radios. It could also be like a WhatsApp chat group on your phone. So we ask you to put some thought into it ahead of time and know how you're going to be prepared to manage emergencies. The Community Liaison Officer Program is relatively new to the city. I'd say 3 years now, Sean? 2 years? 2 years. So community liaison officers are CLOs. We also have PLOs, but community liaison officers are there to help. So they help with a variety of issues that could be, a vulnerable person who's sheltering in a doorway, for example, and you're a business owner, or you're an event organizer, and that's actually the doorway you need to get into in order to get your tents and tables out of the storeroom. So the CLO program can help. We also work really closely with them ahead of time. We give them a heads up. There's an event happening. We want to work with them to make sure that everybody has a good time, whatever their housing status or their social status. We want folks to feel welcome, to have fun at events that draw the community together. So the CLO program is there to help for sure. We do have a 1 number to call, and you can use that at any time. That doesn't have to be just your event time. And it is monitored. It's operational 24/7. And you can also email as well, and they monitor the emails Monday to Friday, 8 to 4. The park liaison officers focus a little bit more closely on park regulations. That could be smoking in parks, for example. That could be some of the other regulations related to parks. There's a whole bylaw, of course, there's a bylaw. There's a whole bylaw around parks as well. And so the park liaison officers focus a little bit more on making sure that what's happening in a park complies and that everyone can enjoy the public realm. Common park bylaws that factor into events are things like no vehicles allowed in the park. Well, what if you need to get a stage in? No driving on the grass. So it does have a few outs in the bylaw that allows you to get written permission from the director of parks. So we'll work with you to figure out what you need. We all want to minimize any damage or risk to the parks. We want to be able to use them for all events, not just yours. And so we'll work with you as much as we can. Something that comes up a lot is wanting to stake things into sports fields. All of those have really complicated irrigation systems. And I can't tell you how many times we have found out that perhaps, oops, a stake went into the ground and it has ruined the irrigation, which renders that soccer field unusable to the soccer team. And a whole bunch of work has to be done and a whole bunch of taxpayer dollars have to be spent in order to fix it. So we're very, very careful. We do mark irrigation for some of your events. If you've done an event on the South Field, which is right by Sportsplex in Queen's Park, you may have been permitted to drive onto the gravel of the baseball diamond and then off because we're really careful about it. So we will work with you. We want your event to be successful, but we do want to maintain our facilities and our park spaces for everyone. There's a cool map. IT gave me this. The park amenity map shows you what amenities are available in the map. So if you're thinking about a new location or maybe a new location for a new event, there is a park amenity map which will tell you what amenities are available. So like washrooms, a dog waste station or whatever it might be. Super close to the end, I promise. Okay, so on the day of your event, city and agency staff, so that might be police, fire, transportation, Fraser Health, they may be there to inspect. We expect to have a phone number for an on-site contact, and we expect to be able to contact them 2 hours before their event. So if your event setup time is 7 a.m., yep, we expect to be able to call you at 5. Not saying we will, it's not a test, but if there's an emergency or if there's some reason, perhaps there was a fire overnight in that venue, we need to be able to contact you and let you know. We're there to support you. We're not responsible for the setup of your event, and that includes food trucks. So you need to make sure you have enough volunteer or staff capacity to manage what you've planned. The event cannot start until you have met all of the requirements within your permit. We don't give you an official like, okay, good, you're good to go, but we'll be there to help you and to point out what needs to be changed. It really depends on the scope and scale of your event. We'll make sure that all vendors and food trucks, especially food trucks are notorious for being late. So we will not permit late entry into the vehicle site, especially once vehicle barricades. In the traffic management plans, we talk about things like a hard closure and soft closures. And once that is in place, it really is in place. That's for safety for everyone. New this year, you will be provided only one contact for the day. We won't give you this great long list where you have to figure out if you're supposed to talk to somebody from irrigation or if you're supposed to talk to somebody from, I don't know, parks. So you'll have your event contact who can help you and they'll triage what needs to be done. Okay. That was the last slide. Before anyone asks me a question, we're going to take a brief break. As I mentioned, there's some snacks out in the hallway. There's some washrooms just down to the down there as well. We've got some swag goodies. And then when you come back in, the event staff will help point you to the direction of anyone that you might have a question for. And I really appreciate you listening. I know that was a long time. So thank you.